Tips from Trestle is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale, Wiseox AI, and Benny Keith Foods. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm joined by Joseph Cope. Joseph, known as the Empathy Guy, is redefining leadership by championing fierce sympathy, a practical, measurable skill that drives real results for organizations. As a dynamic keynote speaker and corporate empathy trainer, he empowers leadership teams to move beyond traditional soft skills and intentionally foster genuine human connection and accountability. His actionable frameworks help transform workplace culture and retention through empathy with intention, showing that empathy is the essential leadership skill for today's results-driven world. Joseph, thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
Well, thanks for that great bio. I'm glad I wrote it myself.
It's stuff, for sure. I love how I get and introduces you without giving away the podcast content. It's perfect.
That's how we roll. That's how we do it.
Exactly. So let's start, right? Let's talk a little bit about empathy with intention, right? Because I think that's a concept that a lot of leaders, especially when you're in the hustle and bustle of like running a senior living community, may be hard to really understand. And then talk about how it differs from sympathy, because obviously those are two very different things. And I want to know what your thoughts are on it.
I'm so glad that you brought up empathy and sympathy from the very beginning, because what my intention in this space is to redefine empathy. Because too often empathy and sympathy are just lumped into this feeling space. It's woo-woo, it's soft, it takes away from accountability, it doesn't give us a chance to get the things that we need done. There's too much emotional stuff involved in it. But what I've discovered, Aaron, is that there is a difference between our empathic nature as humans and driving empathy as a skill with intention in the workplace. You see, our empathic nature is something that we developed as a survival skill because we're humans. Humans are wired to connect. But there are some people who have overdeveloped empathic natures, and there are some people who have underdeveloped empathic natures. But the great mediator between all of that, the great calibrator, is to consider empathy as a skill. Because when empathy is overdeveloped, it tends to come across as sympathy. And sympathy is driven and fueled by emotions, and the outcome of sympathy is resentment. The outcome and driver of sympathy feels like it doesn't feel good, you know? It creates a sense of entitlement. It creates a sense of just, I need you to do this for me. And then on the other side, your underdeveloped sense of empathy is people who tend to just not worry about the feelings, push them down all the time. And that's not a boss that's easy to work for either.
Yeah, no. And, when I think about a senior living leader, right, whether it's a culinary director, an executive director, resident engagement director, the piece there that I think is so important is we deal with connection all day, every day, almost every single minute. Yeah, you can work the spreadsheets or the CRM, but we're dealing with people. And so that's where I think that is so important. And so I want to talk about your model, because you've developed this really fascinating model called Cargo for empathy with intention. And so I'd love for you to kind of briefly walk us through each step and how someone in a business setting, a senior living community operations, can apply it to their everyday tasks.
I'm so glad you asked again from the outset about the Cargo model, because people will ask, how do you measure empathy? How do you know, how does it measurable? And how do you grow it as a skill? So before I go into the 5 with empathy, I want to make sure that our listeners understand that for you to take care of someone else, the very first person, Aaron, you have to take care of is who? Yourself. You have to. Because you cannot pour out from an empty cup. Your capacity to create space for someone else is limited by your capacity to create space for yourself. And the reason I preface the cargo introduction with that is because when we get into the cargo model here in a second, you're going to see embedded within the model is this element of I need to check with myself first.
Yeah.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
So cargo stands for it's 5 letters, cargo. But think about this, Aaron. Cargo is very different than baggage, isn't it?
Yes.
Nobody in the senior living industry wants their baggage to be brought to work ever. But how many times does it unintentionally make its way in, right? And so just to start out by saying it's really important for us to be conscious about what we're bringing into the workplace with us. And when we tend to get overwhelmed, what are we bringing in that doesn't need to be there? Or what can we take a step back from? And just starting out, cargo, baggage, very different. Cargo is delivered with intention. I don't know how many times we're going to say the word intention today, Aaron.
Probably a lot.
When we talk about intention, this is what we're talking about, is delivering space to someone else with intention. And so cargo stands for 5 words: connection, accountability, resistance, gain, and outlook. Connection is simply this: what can I do as the leader right now to connect with this human? That's the first question we want to ask. Is it my tone of voice? Is it my body language? Is it the level of my voice? But just connect. The A stands for accountability. Accountability is not accountability to the mantra on the wall. It's not the code of ethics. Accountability is your accountability to your own personal values. Are you being the change that you want to see in the world? Are you being the mirror that others can see themselves in you? The R stands for resistance. Resistance is not about the other person. Resistance is about in this challenging moment right now, what is the resistance that I feel within myself? So think about those first 3, right? Connection. I got to self-reflect. What can I do to connect with you? The A, accountability. How can I hold myself accountable to what's going on within myself and my values? And the R is, what's my resistance within me? Things like, where do I feel it in my body? What does this remind me of? Just to take that step back. The first 3 levels are just, you can see it's centered on who I am as a person and how I can make myself the best version of me. Tell me your thoughts before I get into the G and the L, because I see you thinking.
I do love it, right? Because I do believe, especially in senior living, right? We are so outwardly focused on taking care of our residents, take care of our staffs, on our families, and reporting up to corporate. Like, we just don't ever, I think, pause and say, what about me? What am I doing? How can I get myself in the right place, in the right space? And I think the way you've got it set up with the starter cargo makes so much sense.
Thanks. It just gives you the opportunity for pause, right? Anytime that we're emotionally overstimulated or dysregulated, whether it's for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons, it's never a bad idea to just take a breath and pause and just give myself a chance to go in the most regulated that I can and asking what am I going to do to connect? How am I holding myself accountable? And what resistance do I feel? Just is like a 3-step shot at giving yourself a chance.
Agreed.
Yeah. Then that G, though, is where we get into traditional empathy. I mean, when empathy is defined in the dictionary as the ability to feel someone else's feelings, to me, that sounds like it's going to lead towards more sympathy than empathy.
Mhm.
If we just leave it at that. The
Right.
way that I like to I'm looking to redefine empathy is the fierce skill that leaders possess to create space for another human so that human can see the value of change for themselves. And once you've gone through kind of that first 3 in that reflective space, now we're ready to talk about the gain. And the gain now is not to you, the leader. The gain is not to the whole organization. The gain is to the individual. The gain is to the recipient. I recently spoke to one of your colleagues in the senior living space, and she was sharing with me that one of the hardest things to work through is the disconnect between the manager and the nursing space, that front line space.
Yeah.
And this resonates so much with me because I have a background in education. So I worked with teenagers for years and years and years. And it feels like we're working with a staff of teenage thinking people.
Mhm.
So sometimes when it comes to the gain of the recipient is their currency. It's what matters to them. If you have people that are working for you in your space, in the senior living space, and you know that they're really, really good, you want to be able to speak in a currency that has value to them. Because after all, if you want your people to invest in themselves, don't you want to spend in a currency that has value to them?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great read on what needs to be done in a community for sure.
Yeah. It's so important, Aaron, to just get to know people. I mean, this is where those water cooler talks are important. Ask about the kids. Ask about how the driving lessons are going with your son, right? Like, ask about the golf tournament. Ask about like how many curbs did he bump into this time? This giving context for that human element to come out so that the people who are working for you as a leader realize that at the base level, they see you as a human. They see you as a human.
No, that was a hard lesson for me to learn early on in my career, right? Because I was very like closed off. I was like, I need to be very business-like. It didn't help that I was younger than most of the people I was managing. So I was in this space of extra levels of professionalism. As soon as I got a little bit more authentic and was more about how does this person connect with me, my leadership and management success took off.
For over a century, Benny Keith has been a trusted leader in the food service industry. As a broadline distributor, we offer an extensive selection of products, delivering to 21 states through 10 distribution centers. We can help you create a thriving culinary culture by pairing quality products with customized solutions that elevate your residents' dining experience. Our team of registered dietitians provide unmatched customer service by modifying menus, selecting recipes, ensuring regulatory compliance, and more. Quality, value, and service are at the heart of everything we do. Benny Keith Foods puts the care back in healthcare.
I love that you said that because it's the human connection, right? Like one of the biggest faux pas, in my opinion, in leadership is when we try to incentivize connection.
Yeah.
Like, here, you've done really well. Here's a gift card to Starbucks. Like that transactional piece of connection, it only lasts for so long. Like it's not going to last forever. What lasts in a place, especially thinking about an industry like senior living, is that human connection, because we're all there to connect with humans. So let's make it as human as we possibly can in the interactions that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then tell us about O.
The O is my favorite because the O doesn't stand for outcome. The O stands for outlook. Just shift the outlook, even if it's fractionally, right?
Yeah.
If you give the challenging moments in life result when high emotions take over. And when high emotions take over, the power of a pause, the power of our ability to see someone for who they are and speak in their currency gives them a chance to choose change for themselves. And that might just be fractionally. That's the outlook shift. If leaders go into these conversations hoping for an outcome, you're in the wrong place already and your currency is going to be off. But if all you're doing in your conversation is just looking to shift the outlook fractionally, it gives a chance for something to emerge between right and wrong.
I love the way you reframe that, because I think a lot of times when we look at frameworks or we think about business practices, that outcome is important, but outlook can be an outcome if you do it the right way.
Yeah.
So let's pick apart a little bit the empathy with intention and empathy as a business skill, because you mentioned it earlier where a lot of times people see empathy as a soft skill. They don't think of it as a tool on their business tool belt necessarily. And so when you talk to organizational leaders who might be skeptical about empathy with intention and as a business skill, how do you demonstrate that the tangible, measurable impact that it can have on them, their team, their organization?
Well, first, I acknowledge the fact that there are people in the world who don't have empathy. And there's actually science out there that defines levels of empathy. As a matter of fact, I just recently came across a fantastic measurable online assessment that is scientifically research-based that gives you the capacity to see where you fall on the empathy spectrum.
Oh, wow.
And so there are some people in the world, let's just acknowledge it. There are some people in the world who, for one reason or another, don't have empathy as an innate piece. Think about some of the people who some researchers have called it their internal pot of gold as a child. It was never filled.
Yeah.
So thinking about, just thinking about all of the different traumas, things that could take place within you at an early age that would cause connection to feel unsafe.
Yeah.
So those are your borderline personalities, your psychopath, that narcissist side. That's the way down, right? But then there's other people who are on the zero, who it's not negative. It's just the way that their brains are wired. I mean, think about some of our folks who are on the spectrum. They don't realize it until somebody points out the pattern of what they're doing and why others are reacting that way. So there is this point that we can actually grow empathy into people consistently, specifically, and with intention.
Yeah.
And when we talk about it as being something measurable, going into these organizations, I really like giving that assessment as a baseline. It's not a judgment. It's just a baseline to see where we are. Because like we referenced earlier, if you're too low on the empathy spectrum, no one wants to work for you, right? If you're too high on the empathy spectrum, no one wants to work for you either, because it's all about the emotions and you're carrying the weight of everybody's emotions. To find ourselves somewhere in the happy middle, women tend to be more empathic just because of their nature, right? Men tend to be less empathic, but there's healthy space in the middle for us to be able to grow that skill of empathy.
Yeah. And I love the way you frame it. Like there's this scale, there's a spectrum, because when we think about just regular business skills, right? There are some people who are good at math and accounting. There are some people who are good at writing and communication. That's all a measurable skill as well. So being able to put that in the same framework, I think, can really get business leaders to see why it maybe is more than just a soft skill, quote unquote. So I'm curious what you've seen as far as mistakes when leaders are trying to be empathetic. We talked a little bit about empathy versus sympathy and how it can bleed over if you aren't doing it right. And so what are some of the things you've seen where leaders, whether unintentional or intentional, just make those mistakes?
I just recently saw some statistics where something like 70% the workers who were in this study felt like their bosses cared more about the outcome than the humans.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not surprising, right? But I really feel for leaders because in this day and age of get it done now, instant gratification, I need more, the stock options have to go higher, the corporate is on our case. Like there is pressure that's coming from above that makes us really easily as leaders fall into survival brain.
Yeah.
And when leaders fall into survival brain, they go to what I call the algorithms of life. Because when you go into survival, you proverbially cut the fat and you don't worry about anything else other than surviving. And in this moment, surviving means meet the numbers. It means get to that digit that I need to get to. So when we talk about driving empathy as a skill, what we're trying to do is change leaders' algorithms so that in the moment of challenge, when we hit survival mode, rather than thinking, what do I need to do to drive the outcome? The moment becomes, how can I shift the outlook here, knowing that the outcome will take care of itself? And when leaders get stuck in that survival space, like you've seen it, Aaron, when it's Monday morning and everything has hit the fan, right? Like, and you've got 3 new families who've got somebody coming in, there's people lining up at the door, and all of a sudden there's a bed in the back that hasn't been taken care of, and we've got 4 people out sick. Like we are in full on survival mode.
Yeah.
But Aaron, here's the thing you asked, like, what are some of the things that I've seen? I'll put it into this way, like a metaphor. When you call 911 in the case of an emergency, they don't call first reactors. What do they call?
First responders.
Because first responders are highly skilled. And even though their adrenaline is rushing and they're going through that survival state, they've got the skill that's built deeply embedded within their algorithms to recognize, wait, what do I look for? Breathing. I'm going to check the pulse. If this isn't there, what am I going to do with intention? And this is what leaders can think in that moment, right? The person who's in front of me, what can I do to connect with this person right now? Am I holding myself accountable? Do I feel resistance? Do I need to step away just for a minute and then come back to this? Am I able to speak in their game? Can I even speak in their game? And am I willing to just shift outlook right now? But even you can see how that happens within nanoseconds once it becomes part of your algorithm that you live your life by.
Yeah. That example is perfect because even just a beat, right? Like you said, that nanosecond, that fractional shift can take that situation you described and make it so less chaotic, so less, I'll say dangerous, right? Because you could lose and damage a lot in what you described. But if you're intentional about how you approach it, all of it can be solved really easily.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Let's talk a little bit as we wrap up here. What advice would you give leaders who want to start building more empathetic cultures, but aren't really sure where to begin?
First thing that I would say is empathetic leaders, if you're looking to build a culture of empathy, start with you. Because it has to start at the top. And the first skill that I always encourage leaders to engage in is the simple but not easy skill of active listening.
Yeah.
And in the moment, you hear words, but can you listen for the message that's underneath? And this is where I can't encourage leaders enough to do the work on yourself to ask you, what are some of the things that are needs in my life that aren't being met? And how are those needs also not being met at work? And this is where we're going to get a little bit deep, Aaron. Like, this is where that piece of that self-work that you're willing to put in on yourself, when you can do that self-work on yourself and recognize what are some of the things that I'm lacking as a human being, and what are some of the things that I'm projecting onto my people, the best way to give yourself a chance to just step back for a minute is to step back and listen, and then ask yourself this question: what am I missing?
Yeah, I love the message. I love the way you frame it. And so if the listeners want to learn more about you, the speaking, the training that you do, how can they connect with you?
I'm most available on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my primary go-to social media, but my website is empathyguy.com. And I actually have a number of speaking engagements that are coming up within and around the United States. So if you happen to be in some of those areas, if you reach out to me, boy, I would sure love to have you as my guest at my speaking engagements. Aaron, I just got invited to be one of the feature speakers at HR Southwest in Fort Worth coming up here in the fall. And I'm really looking forward to jumping up there and be with the people there.
Nice. Love it. Well, Joseph, thanks so much for sharing why empathy with intention is important and valuable to senior living operators. And thanks for being a guest today on Tips from Trestle.
Aaron, it was a pleasure.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.